Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for staying with us this afternoon. We have the hard time to be in the last session, which stands between the rest of the conference and the drinks, which is always difficult. So we're going to try to make the best of it. My name is Frederic Filloux. I'm a technology writer covering new space, writing about platforms and other things. So the title of this session is GAFAM, which is the acronym in France in Europe for big tech. From big tech to space tech. Why did we choose this topic? I mean, nearly every week, every month, we have flurries of news about Amazon leveraging its cloud business to become a key service provider in the sector. In response, we see Microsoft doing a lot of deals with other on its own. Google wants to plug satellite streams directly into its data center and stuff. And of course, there is SpaceX, which is poised to become the sixth horseman of big tech, as some would suggest. At least it bears the DNA of the big tech. And just one number to frame the discussion. And again, I'm mixing a little bit apple and oranges here, but I think this is a very staggering number. The cash reserves of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google amounts to $340 billion right now, which is 37 times the amount of money which has been raised in 2020 in the news space sector. Again, I mean, this is just a number to illustrate what we are facing here. So what we want to discuss now is the impact of this significant move to the industry. Is it more a threat or is it more an opportunity? Is it a sign of maturity we have to deal with? What are the implications on the regulatory side of the business for the European Union or for the states themselves? And of course, what is the perception of the people involved in this business who are working on a day-to-day basis in this web building constellation, launch system and services? So to discuss this, we have Murielle Lafaye, who is online talking from Toulouse. She's the founder and the program manager of the Space Economy Observatory at CNES, the French space agency. She sits in many organizations that are critical to the defined space policy. Judy Wallace is the chief procurement officer of Airbus OneWeb satellite. Her job, which seems very complicated and very challenging to me, is to organize the super complex supply chain of satellite. And I think you are churning out 15 satellites per week, is that correct?
Yep,
yeah.
2 per day, yes.
Yeah, 2 per day, which is kind of an amazing, you're building like Ford is building car, which is kind of amazing. And we have Gautier Brunet, who is Loft Orbital Chief of Staff. He leads the European business development activities with ESA and the European Commission. He joined Loft only 4 months ago. Before he was the COO of TrustMe. Before we go on, Gautier, we are going to stick with you just a moment, because in this audience, many knows about OneWeb and many knows about CNES, of course, but I suspect without being offensive at all, less people know about Loft Orbital. Could you walk us through, please?
Indeed, it's our brand is not quite as strong yet, but hopefully soon. But basically, in a nutshell, Loft Orbital provides space infrastructure as a service. And one thing that's unique about our approach is that we really come to space with the mindset and technologies of the cloud. And so to the greatest extent possible, what we're trying to do is allow our customers, who include startups, larger companies like Honeywell and Eutelsat, as well as space agencies. So we work with NASA, the UAE Space Agency, the Canadian Space Agency. So a very diverse set of clients. We allow them to truly focus on their core business, which is optimizing the use and operation of their payloads. And basically, we fully take care of the rest, just like a cloud provider gives you the service of doing what you want on the cloud, and you do not worry about where the server is or which connections were used to provide that service. So we really push this analogy to the extent possible. And one example of the opportunities, our VP of Engineering is the former VP of Engineering of Dockers. So for those of you familiar with containers and such technologies coming from tech, we are truly trying to bring those to the space agency, which is both a wonderful opportunity and, to be fully transparent, sometimes a challenge as well.
Okay, and to come to our subject, I mean, now you are facing these behemoths of the digital sector. I mean, the big four, big five. What's your feeling about it? Do you see that as a threat, as an opportunity? Do you intend to work with them? Do you believe that at some point there will be some kind of passage obligé, as we say in French, means that you will have to go through them because their service will be great at for less money? What's your general feeling about it?
All of the above, but what certainly is true is that there are significant positive impacts to the involvement of big tech in the space sector, whether it's on the talent, just the exposure, and obviously the investing environment. If companies like who have the type of financial positions and assets are looking into space, then it must mean that there's a lot of money to be made. And so for those of us that are raising funds or looking for talent and looking for visibility, it certainly does have some positive impacts as well.
You mentioned the funding. Do you think it's going to change the perception of the funding ecosystem like it did with the general tech, meaning that when you launch a startup today, your VC are going to look at either your possible exit or either, by the way, through the lens of Google or Facebook or Google or Amazon are going to do what you are doing in a matter of 6 months, and they are not going to give you money. My point being, it will have a huge impact. It had a huge impact on the tech industry in that sense. Do you see the same kind of thing happening with, for instance, companies being by design bound to be sold to one of the big four, big five?
So we haven't seen that a ton historically. I think so. There's the Google acquisition of Skybox in 2015, but other than that, in the space industry at least, I don't think I've seen too many of these exits. I think the main impact is, well, if these guys who have very significant balance sheets are investing massively to go after these markets, then they must think that a number of constellations and other space projects are going to come to fruition. And so whoever is in that supply chain one way or another, and to be honest, we're not directly competing with anything that any of these guys are trying to do. It's actually a positive sign. So, but it could go both ways, obviously.
Sure. If we take a very practical example, when it comes to ground station, for instance, from what I understand, you're relying on KSAT right now. And when I was doing some research for this conference and for other stories I wrote about it, I saw on Amazon AWS ground station, the name of their product, they intend to reduce the cost of operating ground station or dealing with ground station by 80%. So we know that this kind of company is willing to spend as much money as it needs to take a market, to take over a market, and to be some kind of market power. What does it change? What does it change for you? Are you likely to switch to a service operated by AWS, for instance?
So I don't deal with procurement, but I do think that increased competition within our whole supply chain is a good thing for us, and probably Judy is a better person to answer that one. But for sure, because we outsource our ground segment provision, the more the merrier, and the more options we have, and the more competitive options we have, the more competitive we'll be able to be with our clients. So certainly a positive. I mean, if that's true, if we're able to decrease our cost structure, yeah, that's a good day for us.
Yeah, that's a fair. assessments, I would say. We're going to turn to Murielle. She's online from Toulouse. Murielle, as the head of the Space Economy Observatory at CNES, you have a great vantage point on this. How do you see the role of these U.S. tech giants in the new space sector? Again, I mean, same question. Is it a matter of concern to you?
It is, of course. Well, I do think this is an opportunity for the sector because they already have plugged themselves to the data depository of Copernicus, as an example. So that means that this set of data add value. If not, they wouldn't do that. So I think it's an important sign for these big tech entities give to the space sector.
How does Europe should react on this? What could be the change, if any, of strategy in Europe, in the European space ecosystem, with the arrival of these big companies?
I think we should accelerate. We should accelerate to for the Europe to be independent and also to develop our own ecosystem. Well, our weakness today is not to have such GAFAM in Europe, but maybe this will be an opportunity.
Do you think, for instance, we should change the a system which is largely based on spreading subsidies and grants and stuff to some kind of more commercial-oriented approach with a system that could be more comparable to the procurement system there is in the United States with NOAA, NASA, and DARPA, for instance?
What we call new space, in fact, is a way to see that the space sector is now a real commercial industrial sector. And also we have to adapt our procurement to this new evolution. So already in the Copernicus procurement, you have the now data buy possibility with the contributing missions. We hope also that in the new programs, service procurement will increase also, because if we compare to what is done in the US, it's the demand pool that is leading the way. So it means that the federal agencies have been ordered to change their procurement issues, and we should also adapt ours.
In terms of leadership of the European space strategy, do you think that the current way that the whole system is run is has the right structure to migrate and to switch to this kind of procurement system you're referring to?
We are in this approach to make it evolve. As an example, at CNES, now our procurement is more on the service buy, and also we're still supporting R&D, but more and more, even for science issues, it's now more oriented on the service buy. So I think we are in this evolution, and also Europe seems to be in this evolution too. When talking about the connectivity constellation, I think also some procurement will be reorganized in order to for the, let's say, new space actors to bid to these new opportunities.
If you have to name a few measures or a few action to take in order to, I'm using your own word, to accelerate the whole process of developing a procurement system and stuff, what could it be? Give me 3 important measures that should be taken at the European level to speed up this process.
Well, to orientate the procurement on the service buy approach. First, I think it will be one of the main measures, because if we organize this demand pool, then new investors will be interested in supporting the new companies, what they be the providers for the new services. This is a very important issue. Maybe second things will be to accelerate the development of certain R&Ds, because if we want the services to the right performance with at the right cost. We have to orientate all our development with these cost by design issues, and this is something quite new. And maybe third point could be also to to open the procurement to these new actors, and not to be shy.
You think that we are hearing some complaints about this, the fact that the move you're mentioning is not going fast enough. Do you think these complaints are a little bit unfair, or you think it's just a matter of time before we catch up?
I think as an issue with the time to market. Mm-hmm. And we have to accelerate our process. We already have, and well, let's say unfortunately the COVID crisis has helped in accelerating them. Well, I think there is an issue with to be much more reactive than we are, because this issue of the time to market is really designing and will be really a key issue for the actor to take the lead and to take the part of in the market. So we really have to reinvent our procedures, our procurement, and maybe to be more flexible on the accompanying the demand of these new companies.
Okay, thank you very much. Judy, I'm turning to you. You have you're on the both side of the Atlantic, which makes your life kind of complicated. You must be sleep deprived. You don't look like sleep deprived, but you must be by your work. When it comes to coming back to the core of the subject of this session, about the GAFAM, about the big tech, what seems to you the most vulnerable elements in Europe we should be concerned of when it comes to the arrival of the big tech?
Well, first thing I would say is Airbus OneWeb satellites exists today, so it actually proves that Europe can make 2 satellites per day. So maybe just a bit of history of where we came from. The joint venture of Airbus OneWeb satellites was created in 2016. So joint venture between OneWeb, the operator, and Airbus Defence and Space. Maybe a bit closer. So we have, big European backing. We have the experience in mass production through Airbus Group, obviously through the aircraft, the commercial aircraft and the helicopter side. And we also have the satellite design and qualification know-how. So I actually represent the supply chain of this venture today. And it is an industrial model that is 100% reliant on supply chain, i.e. we ship in goods to Florida. That's where the final assembly lines are. And that supply chain is actually based 50% in Europe and 50% in the US and Canada. So it means that we have approximately 20 suppliers today within Europe that are producing equipment to those rates. So going back to Murielle's comments in terms of speed to market, it's extremely true that speed to market and having OneWeb as a customer today is proving that, because we are under immense pressure to build these 36, 40 satellites per month. So that is pushing us to a certain level of performance that the satellite industry has never been pushed to before. So having the likes of SpaceX and, who's already ahead of OneWeb satellites, and Amazon, who's breathing down our necks, is actually an opportunity. There's a lot of emulation there, and it's pushing us as well to remain ahead of that space race.
But isn't it applying some pressure to you, for instance, when it comes to the job market? I mean, these companies are known to pay big ticket for talent. We know that we are in a market, you are in a business which is a little bit tense in terms of talent, I would say. How do you intend to deal with that? I mean, is it, again, a matter of concern to you, or how do you intend to retain your talent, so to speak, your workers, your engineers and stuff?
My answer is going to be multifold. I will say one thing to begin with is we are a third of the personnel are actually based in Toulouse, and 2/3 in Florida. So the I would say political and strategic decision that was made at the beginning of the program was to keep our engineering services, our design to manufacturing, so manufacturing engineering and quality in Toulouse, because we see that as a distinct advantage in terms of having access to high levels of expertise, and also the French engineering schools. It's also a question of salaries in terms of keeping our costs down, because we see it across the market. If we were to set up a similar engineering service in the US,
your costs would skyrocket.
Our costs would skyrocket. So our AI&T, everything that's actually built in Florida, we like to say that the brawn is in the US, but the brains are within Europe. So that actually gives sustainability. It's also, I would say, protecting European know-how, because the brains are clearly kept here. Another thing that we do is the European culture that's spread within our US facility is an advantage, because we look after our employees very differently from a GAFAM, for example, company would do. So, 4 weeks paid time off in the US is huge. Health benefits, well-being within the workplace, etc. It's a very different working culture. And we actually find in terms of retainment, it does make a difference.
For instance, does it rely to does it impact the loyalty of the workers? I mean, in Europe, they are known to be kind of more loyal to the employers than they are in the US, in which they will be much more prone to switch from one company to another. Is it an important factor as well?
It is an important factor. Our company, through OneWeb's Chapter 11, last year was obviously clearly stress tested. OneWeb was under that protection for 6 months. So potentially we could have lost a lot of people through that, but we actually saw, and it was in terms of the actual mission itself, it's in terms of how the company treats people, that we actually saw a high level of loyalty. So we did have to furlough some staff in the US, but those that we did not furlough stayed with us until OneWeb came out of Chapter 11.
Gautier, Loft Orbital is going to face some issue in that regard with a company which is headquarters in San Francisco. It's an American company. You set up an office in Toulouse, and you are about to, I'm not betraying any secret, you are going to raise a Series B, which might be subscribed in the United States. How will you maintain a proper center of gravity for your company between the United States and France?
So Toulouse is by far our fastest growing office. It's where a lot of both the ground and flight software R&D is being done, and we've also opened a control center there. A lot of things that Judy pointed out also apply to Loft. There are incredible benefits to having. So we have a little bit more than a third of the more than 25 people in Toulouse now, and
you have 70 people together, I think.
Yes,
am I right?
Correct. And we do think moving forward, there should recruiting is going to continue to focus on Toulouse, partly for this cost and this balance that we're trying to find. And another benefit of Europe is truly the conditions that were right for Loft Orbital to invest quite massively for the past year and a half, and I think it's like having the best of both worlds. We actually have a third office in Colorado, but having feet on both sides of the Atlantic allows us to take advantage of the strength of each region. And on an operational side, as you know, so we have 2 satellites in orbit currently, and being able to have control centers that are 9 hours apart is actually a huge asset for us as well.
When it comes to the suppliers of your platform, you're relying on BCT, which is based in Colorado, and Leo Stella, which is based in Oregon, if I'm not, in Washington State. what seems to be the future? I mean, are you open to switch to a European supplier or something?
So absolutely. So the payload hub, which is the technology that enables us to make any payload compatible with any bus, is indeed designed to be able to work with any bus provider. And we actually have had significant commercial traction for payloads that are too big for our current buses. So we're in discussions with several bus providers, especially in Europe. And,
cool.
And part of my role is to develop this business in Europe as well.
Judy, I'd like to come back to you and your day-to-day operation. When it comes to the supplier, the ecosystem of suppliers, to which extent your approach is different than the GAFAM, I mean the US big tech, when it comes to dealing with suppliers? Do you have some kind of different policy or strategy with suppliers compared to them? Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, what we actually know about Starlinks, for example, is it's an extremely verticalized model. They're also using, part of the foundries, for example, that they use on the automotive, on the Tesla side. So they have decided to have something that is under their control in terms of verticalization. So it's extremely difficult today to become, I would say, a tier 1 supplier for the Starlinks constellation. So the decision that was made at the beginning of the OneWeb program is we would do something completely different. So it's based on collaboration. It's based on international cooperation as well. So as I said earlier, we are dependent on an international supply chain today. It has its challenges. I'm not saying it's a perfect industrial model, but it also means that in terms of sharing the market, bringing in innovation, the sustainability of the system as well, it does give us greater breadth. And it also means that in terms of the original financing of the project, a lot of our suppliers were actually financed through Export Development Canada, through the BPI in France, etc. So it's also one that's based on, I would say, public money coming into the program earlier on and bringing investment into smaller companies rather than concentrating it with the hands of a few.
Aren't you leaving in terms of speed of execution? Because one of the factors when it comes, the common ground between Tesla and SpaceX is the verticalization allows them to be very, very fast in terms of development. Isn't it a slight hindrance, impediment when it comes to your business compared with them?
We've obviously spent a lot of time in terms of bringing our supply chain up to speed. I mean, we're talking about 35 different companies that are working on this program today as tier 1 equipment, tier 1 suppliers. So it has meant that we've deployed a lot of energy, a lot of effort around the globe. Today, our supply chain, I'd say, is made up of 3 very different groups. So we actually brought up to speed a third of them, which were R&D labs or even people working out of garages. We've got a couple of success stories in Spain, a couple of success stories in Germany as well. So we've brought them up to space standards and mass production. We're also working with, I would call them traditional space companies, but who'd never necessarily mass produced in the past. And the third category, and I think it's probably one of the best categories in terms of emulation, is companies that weren't in the space industry at all, that were already mass producing in the automotive industry, in electronics for missiles, in the aeronautics industry, and wanted to diversify. And somebody mentioned it on an earlier panel, that has brought a lot of wealth and an exchange of ideas. And I actually think that it has pushed us as a company today to challenge the status quo, the traditional space status quo, and it's actually helped us to gain speed, to actually see how it's done in other industries.
Gautier, about the supply chain, what's your view? How do you deal with that at Loft? Do you have it hard to maintain some kind of fairly active ecosystem of suppliers, or do you?
I mean, we leverage, both in the U.S. and in Europe, what is available. You're asking the impact on the GAFAM on the supply chain, for example?
Yeah, among other things. Yeah.
Well, so you brought up an example where, AWS could, theoretically become part of our supply chain. And if the claim you mentioned is true,
it's not me. It's on AWS, so I don't endorse them. I suspect that 80% of a discount for ground service station sounds a lot to me. But
well, it sounds great, and
but even though if it is 40%, that's something non-negligible, I guess, in terms of competition.
Right. So in some cases, definitely a positive impact in terms of the number and the competitiveness of the options we have, I guess. But it is, I think, more broadly, helping a lot of new companies, raise capital and bring new products to market, and that's always a plus for us as well, to be able to keep pushing, increasing the capabilities of what we offer to our final customers.
Just a final question to both of you. As I asked to Murielle earlier, in terms of European leadership, European policies when it comes to developing, maintaining an healthy and vibrant ecosystem, what could be the best, what could be your wishes, what could be the best structure? I keep bumping into people, I'm not going to name anyone, who say to me, well, when we came up with this novel technology and stuff, we were literally put away by the whole establishment of the space in Europe and stuff. It seems to evolve, to be fair, it seems to evolve in the right direction right now. How far are we to have some kind of optimal system in that regard, to foster innovation, to maintain a great and vibrant and healthy European ecosystem in space? What should we do? Judy?
I don't say that I've got a baked answer to that question. Once again, I think we should look at what Europe has already done today. We do not have that much contact with national space agencies or European space agencies. So building those bridges between the private sector and what's actually already been achieved, and actually creating some kind of working group around that would definitely be, a good way forward.
I definitely the trend seems to be good. I've had
everybody says
friends, so I've heard a lot of similar.
We come from very far away.
Yeah, so I heard similar stories, let's say a few years ago. But Loft Orbital, for example, is benefiting from very strong support from CNES, whether it's in the frame of the Plan de Relance or otherwise, and I think there's much more alignment between what agency, CNES in particular, in our case, but agencies in general, are trying to do, and the interest of the development of the new space ecosystem. So, whether it's perfect, I don't know, but it's definitely going the right way.
Okay, well, are there some questions? Do you have time for one or two questions in the room, or maybe one question if someone is willing to? Unless you really want to go to the drink, which I will completely understand. Sorry, you want to go to the drink, aren't you? Okay. Okay. Oh, well, I will thank you for the panelists. Murielle, thank you very much for talking to us as well. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Gautier. And have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now we know well Loft Orbital. Thank you, Gautier. Thank you, CNES. And do not forget that OneWeb we will be launched this evening at 20, about around 8 p.m. on the Soyuz launcher. So good luck. Huh? Good, very good. So it is the end of that day. It's time to turn off the light. I was very happy to be your master of ceremony for this afternoon. I am not used to do it, but I was happy to do it. So enjoy the end of that day, and I wish a good luck for your project, and I hope to see you next year. Thank you.